Friends, welcome, my friends, to the latest episode of Friends Let's Discuss on Monday, the 13th of April. Now, if you are following us, Mum, and wonder why we haven't had an episode for a while, it's because we did take a little break for Easter holidays. So how was your Easter holidays?
It was really good. We took a trip to Portugal. We hired a tiny car. It was 4 of us. So my daughter, my wife, my mum, and all our luggage were packed into like a little Toyota Yaris. You know, you get like hire cars, and it's a car you would never ordinarily get to drive. I have a fondness for Toyota Yaris now because it was like just so fun, like this hybrid car, and like I was just so impressed at how like nippy it was. Like I wouldn't have thought a car that size could get like, 4 people and all their luggage around the narrow streets of Portugal, but it was fantastic. It might have been the highlight of the holiday for me, apart from the rotisserie chicken. They do good rotisserie chicken, don't they?
They do good rotisserie chicken. Yeah, I was going to say, make sure you don't mention the name of the place as your wife will kill you, because she's kept it under lock and key for a select group of us, because it's such an amazing place and it's so untouched
100%.
at the moment. So she rightly wants to gatekeep just for a little bit longer, which I'm fully on board with until we complete our friends trip, selfishly.
I don't think we gatekeep enough. I'm just going to have to just keep quiet about so many things. If I find something nice, I'm not letting all people just find out and ruin it. So yeah, we're totally aligned on that.
Like, we went to Oma on Friday night, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's a restaurant in London. We've been before. You probably tell, but I'm a huge foodie, and it is the best place in London, hands down. And there's no point gatekeeping it because it's so popular. You literally have to log on 31 days before the date you want and keep refreshing in the hopes that you could get a table. Yeah, so it's great. It sounds like an amazing Easter break, Club. It sounded like a great adventure. We all caught up on Tuesday on it. And yeah, I was also away in Southeast Asia. Very, very nice breakaway. I would say you can tell I've got a bit of a tan, but the MacBook is not, unfortunately, showing it very well, which is a bit of a shame. But yeah, it was lovely, actually. It was really nice just spending time with the family. We went to the beach for a few days as well, which was so lovely. Just walking into the hotel room, and they had this sort of panoramic view of the sea, which again, as you all know, our friendship group, I'm always harassing our friendship group about buying some land near the sea so we could all basically set up a retirement community together. But that's super important. But yes, so obviously we've taken a bit of a break, love, but so much has happened, obviously, in the last few weeks. Whilst we weren't engaging with our listeners and viewers, I was spamming you on the social media.
I was like, Mira, you're on holiday. It's okay. Mira's like, no, have you seen this? Oh my God, I can't believe this has happened.
Yeah, so I'm not particularly good at taking a break. I will fully admit to that. But I think let's start, if you don't mind, with some rare good news, which is, for those of you who don't know, the Hungarian election yesterday, Viktor Orban, the right-wing, Russia-backed leader, was ousted after 16 years. Positive good news. But for those who don't know, love, why actually is it good news?
I think it's huge. I mean, like you say, he's been in power for 16 years. He came in on like a pretty big majority, right? I think he had like 2/3 of the parliament. And so he was able to push through a bunch of laws that basically like shape Hungary in his own image as much as he wanted to. And part of it is that it was a bit of an experiment politically that I think the Hungarian people just got sick of eventually, where on one hand, he would say one thing, but then do another. So one of the examples, which I found really interesting, is that he was quite anti-immigration, at least on the face of it. But then apparently, quietly, he was trying to encourage immigrants from Sri Lanka, Philippines, even Ukraine to work in the factories, because obviously they were getting paid way less than Hungarians. So there's a lot of sort of doublespeak taking place. Of course, as you mentioned, he was sort of backed by Putin. The Trump administration also backed him as well. And so for that to be overturned is huge. I think one of the things as well is that Peter Magyar is 45 years old. The party he has led to this victory It's only been around for 2 years, so relatively new party. And he was part of Orban's administration at one point. So interesting that he was able to sort of see the inner workings and still was like, this is wrong, this is bad, this isn't what Hungary needs. Relatively young, as I said, 45 years old, and a lot of the people involved in the election were relatively young as well. So I think it's one of those things where it's almost like older people just become accepting of their fate, whereas the younger people still have that optimism and still have that energy to mobilize and make change happen. And it looks like it's a huge victory. I can't remember the numbers. We'll include it in the imagery that we share on YouTube. But a really significant result, and by a large majority as well. I don't know if you took anything from that.
Yeah, I mean, I just took a huge amount of positives from it, honestly, love. Because the thing is, to your point, over the last 16 years, he has consolidated his power, much like most dictators do. So he took over huge parts of the judiciary. He took huge parts of the media. He tried to stifle dissent. He brought in a lot of laws that really worked against the people. Despite all of that, and despite a lot of the concerns in the run-up to the election about election interference, plus the huge backing that they had from the Russian propagandist, as well as, obviously, as you say, Trump's MAGA movement, despite all of that, the people won. I think that's the piece to take away. So I've noticed today, obviously, a lot of the American outlets like Midas Touch and Robert Reich, and obviously Bernie Sanders will come on board soon, are kind of taking this as a movement for hope, not hate, which is the people 100%, despite all of the obstacles in one's way, and mobilize to the extent that they can oust someone even like this. Right. And I take that as a huge win and a positive. And it's sad, isn't it? Because this is the textbook thing for a dictator. They all do this. They promise you, they blame somebody, they promise you these huge things, but really all they do is consolidate their power, take agency and power away from you. And then it leads to a significant amount of corruption, which is, again, one of the reasons the Hungarian people voted against him. And a lot of wealth transference to a small group of people that are allied. America is obviously going through exactly the same thing. The reason I was laughing when you were talking about Trump is obviously JD Vance. He kind of came over on his white Stetson and yet again failed. So this is the second time I think this has happened. So the first time was he had also endorsed his brother, who I believe was in the run for a Senate seat. And his brother spectacularly lost with JD Vance's endorsement. And now, obviously we like to joke about it. I obviously don't know the causality, but again, the kind of hubris of the American administration to think that talk about interference and then interfering and then actually, basically, somebody was saying on social media, I kind of really wish that this guy would travel around, just visit Le Pen too, visit Reform, because actually he can kind of help us, to be honest.
They're going to see him coming and be like, no, you're good. Just stay there. In fact, just stay offline. We don't want to see your face. We don't want to see your messages. You're not helping.
My name out of your mouth.
Yeah, I think it's really, like, to your point as well, just amazing, because we talk about Russian interference and how well they are, how capable they are with misinformation, and putting so much out there to sort of convince people that, up is down, right is wrong. And the Hungarian people saw through that, which is fantastic, and on a personal note that's really insignificant, I visited Budapest years ago, and I was like, oh, this is a beautiful city. Like, it's a beautiful place. People are really friendly. And so, just on a very personal note, I'm like, I'm so glad that they got rid of this guy, because it seems such a stain on, like, the character and the side of at least Budapest that I saw, that, their leader was this horrible guy. So yeah, well done, Hungarians.
And it seems like what's really interesting for me, love, reading the articles this morning, is a large part of the victory was driven by young people, as you were saying earlier today. And it is funny to me because obviously we spoke about the social media ban in Spain previously, but having, as I was telling you guys when we met this week, like having spent some time with elderly relatives, if they're listening, you know I love you, but I have to call this out. Average age, I'd say about 70 to 75. Actually, I think social media is scarier in the hands of the elderly than it is in young people, because I feel like young people know how to cut through the noise. They know how to see what is AI generated, what is not, what is propaganda, what is not. Not easily, but again, it's a learning thing. But I feel like they're faster at learning how to be able to filter. I think and again, I'm generalizing hugely here, but from my kind of small sample set, the older generation, which I also wonder is why they're so much more right wing as they get older, they seem to be more susceptible to this kind of propaganda. It's a really tough thing to then have to fight against through like logic and reason, because you can even hear the sound bites that they say are like reverberated, just like when you hear people who have been indoctrinated by Fox News, they literally verbatim, they say the same thing. Do you see what I mean? So yeah, it was kind of fascinating. But yeah, so I do think there's definitely, I think it's the same in America, to be fair. Like there's a huge movement of young people that are really driving a lot of change in the States as well, which is also why at the moment there is a bit of there's a disconnect between the democratic establishment and young people, and people like Mamdani and AOC and Bernie, who are trying to push for a more relevant agenda that people will actually resonate with versus what's potentially just this kind of middle of the road nonsense that really is just the same of the same of the same. Do you see what I mean? So like there's this whole thing. I don't know if you know Hassan Piker. He's a Twitch streamer. He's kind of this extremely attractive, not that that has any sway, obviously, on my opinion. Extremely attractive. Again, I didn't even hear of Twitch until I kind of came across an article about him. But essentially, he's on the left, but he's on the left, I'd say, with an extremely large following of young people. And he's, I would say, kind of in the Mamdani Bernie kind of camp, this kind of let's talk about universal healthcare, let's talk about affordability, the genocide in Palestine is wrong, etc., etc. But for some strange reason, which I still can't quite get my head around this week, there's been a huge push through the mainstream media and the democratic establishment to essentially denigrate him. It's so confusing, honestly. Like I'm literally Googling, trying to understand, like, what exactly did he do? And yes, he's made some comments which were stupid. I think he said something about 9/11. He said something about the Israelis in the context of what was happening in Palestine. But again, nuance is obviously lost on social media, but they've sort of just kind of like honed in on these two examples that seem to just keep going round and round and round. And it's just an interesting one, honestly, just watching everything that's playing out, because you're almost a bit like, how is this helpful?
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's always more going on beneath the surface, though, isn't there? Like I know one of the things that I came across was how it's very common for both British intelligence services as well as US intelligence services to set up these parties to split the vote. So there's always something going on beneath the surface, which maybe reporters can't confirm and can't be spoken about. But yeah, it might take, like you say, like a lot of Googling to sort of investigate and uncover what's really going on there.
Because it's crazy to me, because at the end of the day, much like we've seen with Hungary, and to be fair, in other places as well, the young people mobilizing in the US, of course, as well, is a large part of why change is happening, right? And candidates are coming to the fore that are really talking about a future, really, things that can give people an actual future, and when you're 24 and you're unemployed or you see nothing available to you from your government, it's really huge. So I find it really puzzling that they're kind of going after this guy that appeals to so many young people, to sort of, again, fracture a vote. And again, what I find absolutely wild in this is people are angry at him because he said that he didn't support Gavin Newsom, because Gavin Newsom is very much, corporate Democrat, mainstream, APAC funded, all that kind of shit. And he was just saying, like, if he's the candidate, like, I don't think I'm going to vote for him. Oh, that's crazy. And it's just like, but what really frustrated me, it's the same with Kamala Harris as well. In this whole thing, she refused to say that the genocide was a genocide. And as a result, people lost a lot of votes. And then those people got the blame. But why didn't you listen to the people? Why didn't your platform reflect what the vast majority of people are feeling so that they could vote for you because your interests aligned? It's almost like these guys are so entrenched in the system, they're working it backwards. So like, I'm the politician, I'm telling you what you need to feel and what you need to care about. Just vote for me. And if you don't, it's all your fault when everything goes wrong.
I want to wrap up on Europe, but to your point, I feel like America is such a corporation now that even the politicians put corporation before to call political motivation. And so, like you say, because there's, funded by these huge lobbying groups, they're not going to say anything that like goes against the hand that feeds them, And it's such a shame that, we can't remove ourselves from that. But hopefully, like you say, the sort of newer candidates coming through, whether it's the Mandanis of the world or someone else, even if it's like, Bernie Sanders, like you say, not a young candidate, but someone who is so progressive and so radical, but like positive change, like that can make a huge difference. And hopefully that inspires young people to build a better future for themselves,
So, because again, to your point on Europe, because I don't want to just make it all US, but like even in the UK, love, if you look at the latest polling now from 16 to 24-year-olds, the vast majority voting for the Green Party. And again, what is the platform of the Green Party, right? It's let's address income inequality. Let's make sure we keep the NHS. Let's think about how can we do better by the environment. Let's be actively honest about a genocide that's happening in Palestine, and let's call it what it is, and let's stop arming the people that are committing it. Why are we complicit? Like just what seems like common sense things.
None of that should be hard.
I don't understand. I mean, that's the thing. And even like with Labour, like the immediate reaction of Labour is just the attack. But he's a hypnotist. He's an actor. He's telling you to come out of NATO. But again, it's the establishment telling you as a voter, you need to think this way. You need to do what we're telling you. But you've completely got it wrong, guys. Like the whole point is that you're listening to the vast majority of people who are telling you day by day that they're struggling. Affordability is a problem. And we understand that things are more complex. We have a lot more old people. We have pensions that are triple up. We have complicated health issues. We've got more expensive medications that the NHS is paying for, not least because Trump is trying to fleece everybody, obviously, and the pharmaceutical companies, blah, 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 blah. But nobody's saying those things aren't a thing. Instead of listening, it just feels like you're telling. Do you see what I mean?
And also, to your point, it's strange that they're still pursuing that path and everything that's happening in politics at the moment. There does seem to be what we would view as a positive trend, because I know we didn't really get to discuss it at the time. Stephen, the referendum that took place in Italy, which would have given more judicial power to the right-wing government, and that being sort of overturned largely by the young vote, by people who, took part, like the mass participation point. It seems like, hey, if you're trying to push what you think is the agenda that suits you, you're going to be found out pretty quickly. Thankfully, we're still in a democracy. When it comes down to it, when it comes down to the election, hopefully the people will realize that they actually do have the power in this system. And to your point as well, you are encouraging us to write to our local politician around Palantir. I don't know if you want to say a bit more on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've spoken a few times. So Fabian is really good at researching AI tech companies. Both of us have an interest in tech, obviously. Palantir, as you guys know, was founded by Peter Thiel, and I think it's Alex Karp now as well who runs it. Essentially, they set up a £1 contract, of course, with the National Health Service. They're now in the National Health Service. They have access to so much data of our healthcare data. They're now also within our armed services. But Palantir as a company are extremely, I don't want to say the word dangerous because it sounds really dramatic, but they are quite dangerous as a company.
I think it's fair to call them dangerous.
It is fair to call them dangerous, right? Love, like what they're using and what they will end up using that data for, not least as we've seen over the last year or so with what happens when we as a British people, as a sovereign country, have so much reliance on a foreign country. Yes, it's America, but they're a foreign country, and boy, is Trump trying to screw us all at the moment. That is extremely dangerous. And on April the 16th, there is a vote in the House of Commons to discuss the role of Palantir within the National Health Service and the Armed Forces. So I would encourage, if you are interested in this topic at all, to please write to your MP. And if you feel any type of way, express that sentiment to your MP so that can be reflected in the House of Commons debate on Wednesday. So my email is ready to go to be sent to my local MP today. And so if you have the opportunity to, I would really encourage you guys to do so, because I think this is a very, very dangerous company and I don't want them anywhere near us, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, and I think, and if you're at all intrigued by this and maybe, doubting that we're coming at it from a sort of neutral perspective, you see your research. It won't take you long to find an interview with Alex Karp saying the most outlandish things. He's not anyone that you want to give your data to, let alone data of an entire nation. Backlogged through, the history of the NHS. It's so crazy that this is a thing that we're having to sort of push back against, that the government isn't protecting us at this sort of very basic and fundamental level. The only idea I had, and I don't know whether or not this is a bad idea, probably shouldn't be discussing this whilst we're recording, but I thought maybe we could sort of produce a letter just so that people don't have to go through the effort of having to write it themselves, and they can just sort of access a Google Doc and just copy and paste the email to whoever their local leader is, their local MP is, and that's something we can just link to in the show notes. So if you're watching this and there's a link that says copy this, then do that and email it to your MP. If you don't see that link, then we didn't do it. Maybe just pivot into positive news, maybe. I wonder what your take was on the whole NASA mission to the moon via Artemis II.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing is there's no video on Spotify, so you probably didn't roll. Listen, love, I think it's amazing. It's, scientific curiosity, advancement. We get to learn more about the moon. Okay, that's really great. The video of the poor astronauts having to engage with Trump was cringe on a million different levels. But I don't want to be short-termist or small, because it's not like I'm a visionary, but I guess what I struggle with is how much money did they spend on that?
Yeah.
You're taking healthcare away from Americans. You're taking away SNAP payments from the poorest Americans. You're forcing Americans under this bullshit act, which is just a form of voter suppression, to now have to pay to get passports and other forms of ID just to exercise their democratic rights. You're funneling shed loads of money into war and ICE when Americans are struggling to make ends meet. And like I said, I don't want to be, not a curious person, because I think scientific discovery is exceptionally important, but I just don't know how this is the most important thing at this moment in time. Do you know what I mean?
Completely agree with you. I was worried I was just being a bit miserly about it. Maybe I'm just missing the point. It's I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, the amount of money being spent on this. How is this top of the list of priorities for humanity at this point in time? If you scratch just gently below the surface, you realize that this is not for the betterment of humankind. This is just political posturing. because China and Russia are planning to go to the moon. And so we wanted to get there first. China and Russia are planning to build a moon base. And, I say we, the Americans, with some support from the European Space Agency, decided that actually we better get there before Russia and China claim the moon for themselves. So this is just about finding resources and claiming it. It's not about the betterment of humankind. It's about political and economic advantage remaining in the Western Hemisphere. That's it. And it's frustrating because I feel like there are super intelligent, super ambitious, and well-meaning scientists involved in this. I just wish they were working on things that had tangible benefits to us here on Earth. But we've not done such a great job with Earth that we should then go to the moon and try and replicate what we've done. It's just not. Yeah, it's frustrating. It's frustrating.
It's so
But
frustrating because exactly, sorry to interrupt you, love, because exactly to your point, and again, not to discredit these incredible brains and these people that have achieved incredible things, could we not have used that to find solutions for a warming Earth, to find more creative solutions to help us reduce our reliance on plastics and find a way to develop materials that are more environmentally friendly, to help to move us away from greenhouse emissions and nuclear energy in order to provide. So there are so many smart people in this world, as we have seen from this space mission and those in NASA and the European Space Agency. Why can we not help this planet and ourselves? And that's what I find frustrating with it all.
yeah, and I think it's also the thing of previous space missions had, gone to the moon, gone to space, and came back and said, "Oh, look, this is going to make us so much healthier, so much happier, going to improve the world." You'd be like, "Yeah, fuck yeah, go to space, go to Mars, go even further, do it." It's just not true. It doesn't bear out in any substantive ways. Yeah, I'm seeing all of this coverage on the news and seeing everybody speak about it in such positive terms, and I'm like, okay.
I feel like we started off by saying, so we've got some positive news
Yeah.
about space, and we've just basically crapped on it.
I wanted to make sure it wasn't just me, so I was like, give it a chance. That Mira will change my mind on this. Mira will have the positive angle on this, and you were thinking the same way I am. I'm like, okay, well, at least I'm not crazy. This is what this is, right? It's just proven that between the two of us, we don't see each other as crazy.
100%. I wonder, yeah, please feel free to leave a comment,
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
disagree with us, because we would love to understand, what are we missing on this? Maybe we are missing something. And again, we don't want to just come across as really miserly on this. If it helps to share a positive story, although is it really a positive story? I don't know if it's a positive story, but it was just really entertaining, which again, one should not laugh at because I don't condone stealing, of course. But this whole thing with Kit Kat, 2 tons of Kit Kats were stolen or something. It was this huge thing on social media with all of these brands basically pretty much just taking the piss. Oh, it wasn't me. KFC were like, oh no, it's not us. We only like chickens or whatever it is. That was quite funny, but it was interesting watching the comments on it because people were kind of like, is this the thing that one comments on? Someone has stolen. It wasn't me, even though I do love Kit Kats, just to clarify. Is this something to be laughing at? Is this a joking matter? I don't know.
Well, and also, last week, I don't know if you saw the whole thing with the Kimberly Clark warehouse fire.
Oh God, yes.
And so I feel like there's this thing happening where maybe people are just sort of reached the last straw and they're like done caring. The corporations don't care about us. Why should we care about the corporations? And so I don't know if this is something that's just gonna be a reoccurring theme or if it was just two relatively isolated incidents, but it's maybe something to pay attention to.
Yeah, no, it's a really great point, actually. Because that's the thing, isn't it, love? This whole thing about who's a terrorist and who's a not. Do you know what I mean? So something happens, even the other day in England, something happened, and initially they tagged it as a terrorist incident, but as soon as they found out the person wasn't brown, it was not a terrorist incident anymore. You know what I mean? Or like, what's that saying about Che Guevara? One man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. And the thing is, like, as you get into this position where people feel more and more disenfranchised, they don't feel listened to. The government isn't acting for you. The corporations are exploiting you. Like, I agree with you. Like, is this the right action to take if you've done the protests, you've emailed your MP, you've talked about it, you've tried to convince others in your circle to explain your reasoning, you've written to your MP, you've protested, and then nothing happens. Yet again this weekend, 500 largely British pensioners got arrested for a Palestinian protest because they referenced Palestine Action again. We had so many lovely police officers that are just like, cradling the arm of some elderly lady as they walk her to the prison van. But I'm thinking, like, when these things don't work, love, what do you do next?
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and again, we're not condoning violence. In fact, it shouldn't ever get to the stage where violence is even an option. It's just that if you continually ignore, dismiss, and denigrate people, and all of the so-called democratic norms that we're there to exercise are ignored and denigrated, and people are arrested for exercising their right to protest and blah, 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 blah. The scary thing is what people turn to next, right? And this is the thing, like, I was reading something the other day about the creation of Hezbollah, who are tagged as a terrorist group in Lebanon. Hezbollah were only created after the first invasion of Lebanon by Israel. But again, Hezbollah as an entity are making it unsafe for all of the Lebanese people because now they're all victims of that situation. Like, I just don't know what the answer is, love, honestly, especially in these kind of situations when you watch what's happening in the Middle East. And I know we're not supposed to call it the Middle East, but particularly with Israel, this Israeli government acting as the aggressor, but no international community is speaking up except for a handful of people. There is no action against the genocide. Genocide scholars have flagged it. The ICC, the ICJ have sort of indicated that Netanyahu's a war criminal, and yet nothing happens.
Yeah. And this is the thing, I think, to your point, one, police should never, our police should never have to be asked to remove like old age pensioners and send them to a police van. That should never happen. And I feel sorry for any policeman or police person that has had to do that. That's ridiculous. It's a complete waste of their time, complete waste of their training, just ridiculous on every level. And then to your point, the fact that Palestine Action Group had been designated as a terrorist group, that got overthrown. And then the UK government is appealing that High Court ruling that is not. It's like nuts, especially to your point, when you consider that Netanyahu there's a warrant out for his arrest by the International Criminal Court of Justice. And so this is a recognized war criminal that you're defending effectively. Like, what do we have to do to like find justice? And you get to that point where you're like, democracy is taking too long. It's too slow a process. Because you're right, we can wait for the vote, and hopefully, when the time comes, people will vote for a party that says no to this sort of thing, that says clearly, this is a crime, this shouldn't happen, this is genocide. Simple things that everybody can see that is objectively true. But the next general election is so far away that maybe we'll forget that by that point. And so it's like, we need change to happen now, not wait for all these lives to just be expired. And so I think that's the frustration. I think, again, as you've already said, we should always avoid violence. That's never something that I would support, and I'm sure you would never support that either. But it's the patience that's required to go through the right processes is on a whole other level. It's a big burden to deal with.
Hugely. Yeah. I worry more and more for it, love, as well, because the challenge is And I know there's been a lot of debate again this week, over the last few weeks, about Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and all these right-wing nut jobs who have suddenly finally seen the light that most other people with sense, so like Mehdi Hassan at Zateo has been calling this action against the Palestinians apartheid, it's oppression, and then it became a genocide. And these guys have finally caught up. But what scares me is the enemy of my enemy is not always my friend. You know what I mean? And that's what makes me worried, because again, in this situation, as people feel more and more frustrated, they feel like nothing is happening, no action's being taken. Then you have some Jewish ambulances that are set on fire the other day. Again, nobody was hurt, thank God. But again, not to agree with the actions of those individuals, because that was pretty stupid, frankly. Is this kind of thing going to happen more? And what scares me the most, love, is that you and I, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners and viewers, can distinguish between all Jewish people and this group of settler Jewish Zionists that are residing in Israel that are driving a lot of this extremism. We can distinguish between that, but can other people distinguish between that? Can other people distinguish between you and I and job stealing asylum seeker on the street? Right? I don't think so, right? Like, how would you know? Like, unless I wear my passport on my forehead, like some guy in America started to do, just to be like, I'm a US citizen, I'm a US citizen. Like, it's very scary when it gets to that stage, because it puts everybody at risk. And that's why I am not a fan of violent resistance, because I think there is way too much damage to everybody around you, not least the people you're trying to supposedly target. You know what I mean?
And I think that's the frustration, because everything that you said is so easy to reason out. You don't need to be like a super intellectual to see that when you violently attack someone, anybody around is going to want some sort of retribution. And so, even when there's this supposed ceasefire between Iran and the US, and yet the Israelis are still bombing, sending missiles over to Lebanon, like, what do you think is going to come of that? There's nothing good that comes of that. It's only going to cause more hatred and more violence. And so, yeah, I don't know. I have to sort of be suspicious of people that, encourage that behavior, whether it's, the person on the street or the person in political office. It's just, you are warmongers at that point. There's no other way to describe your actions and your beliefs.
% love. And then that's it, isn't it? Whenever Netanyahu comes out and complains about anti-Semitism, I'm always like, bruh, are you having a laugh right now? You are the reason that it's on the rise. And it shouldn't be. As we say, like, most of us can distinguish in the same way that, like, when the London bombings happened, love, people would move away from me on the tube. Like, let's put aside that I'm not even Muslim, not that that should matter, but even just as a brown person, because I had my rucksack to carry my laptop in, then obviously I was like, oh shit, like, oh, better move away from her. So, like, in the same way that Muslims experience Islamophobia because of the actions of some nutcase in Al-Qaeda or whatever, unfortunately, Netanyahu is causing a significant lack of safety for Jewish people worldwide because of his utter nonsense and his evil. That guy, Ben Gvir, I mean, he is next level sociopathic evil. I've never seen anyone wear a hangman's noose as a badge on their suit before. I mean, it's fucking, forgive my language, it's fucking insane. And the fact that it's just publicized and just said as if it's like a normal thing is probably why people feel, I imagine people who are listening to us, and hopefully if they agree with us, feel just as like, what on earth is happening right now? Like, this is insane, isn't it?
How do you make sense of it all?
And I think you're right, love, because obviously we do need to talk about the ceasefire with Iran. So I suppose as a recap, in 2016, I believe it was, President Obama, supported by some European countries, signed a non-proliferation treaty for nuclear weapons with Iran, i.e. they would not enrich above a certain level, which would allow them to build nuclear weapons. There was a fatwa under Khomeini, which said that he wouldn't build nuclear weapons because it just wasn't allowed. President Trump, because he didn't like that Obama had written it, tore it up like the 2-year-old that he is, made the world less safe. So obviously then the Iranians are like, okay, great, well, that doesn't apply anymore. So maybe we'll just start continuing with what we're doing. But again, no evidence they were actually building a nuclear weapon, but still, they came to the table 6-8 weeks ago. They were negotiating. They left on a Friday night. In the early hours of the Saturday morning, Israel and America bombed them. In the middle of negotiation of a peace deal or a long-standing agreement, and so commenced the Iran war. And on a near daily basis, President Trump and his gang of sycophants in the MAGA party vacillate between essentially threatening the guy, then talking about a deal, then threatening the guy, talking about a deal, then threatening him and saying, oh, why do you have weapons? We're going to attack you with no provocation. But why do you have weapons? Oh my God, it's crazy that you have weapons. And then they finally had supposedly a ceasefire deal, which Israel ignored because they continued to bomb Lebanon, which again, and not just bomb Lebanon, but essentially displace 1.2 million people in South Lebanon and force them out of their homes because they're now expanding. It's not enough that they're expanding into the West Bank, which is not their land. They're now expanding into southern Lebanon as well, which was again part of the Greater Israel Project, as I understand it, but I'm sure our viewers will be more educated on that. Anyway, so then they roll out JD Vance, who, as we've discussed at the beginning of the podcast, is a hugely successful politician. I mean, anything he touches turns to gold, obviously. Then he's backed up by Witkoff, who is witless, and Jared Kushner, who looks like he's starved of oxygen at birth, but somehow has landed himself in the middle of all of these things, even though he's not elected by anybody, and he's not even a proper government official. He has no authority to be acting on behalf of the United States in any of this stuff. And yet again, there is no deal. Of course there is no deal.
And also Trump, during the process of the deal being made, saying we're going to wipe your civilization off the face of the earth if you don't sign this deal. Like, oh, what a way to get that negotiating oil, into the joints and get the wheels turning, Just threaten mass genocide of an entire nation. Like, what are you doing? Then the fact that whilst all of this is taking place, isn't at the negotiating table, isn't at one of the most crucial deals taking place in the world today, he's at UFC watching mixed martial arts fighters punch the crap out of each other. Doesn't give a fuck. You've got no concern about it. It's the maddest thing in the world.
It's mad, love. In Americans, at last count, gas had gone up by $1 a litre, which is almost 100% increase from what it was. And the Americans are super sensitive because obviously, not to segue, but they obviously have zero public transport because the car manufacturers made sure they didn't have public transport, blah, 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 blah. But even that civilization comment, love, like, it's so fascinating to me because everyone talks about, I remember when Trump was first pitched in his pre-first term presidential race, people were like, oh, do you know, it's really important because he's a really successful businessman. And it would be really good if we had a successful businessman in power. Clearly, you didn't actually look at his track record because he was not in the realms of being a successful businessman. And the thing that I find fascinating about it all, love, obviously, because both you and I come from corporate environments, is what is diplomacy but basic negotiation, which is understanding that but a bigger scale, obviously, because you're talking about states negotiating with each other. But fundamentally, it's a negotiation where both parties need to feel that they've got something from this discussion, right? That's all negotiation is. That's all diplomacy is. It's just a fancier term for it in the government space. Trump doesn't understand that because he's not successful at that. Trump was a low-level mafia agent that ran a protection racket with news agents on the street corner. And you go threaten them with violence and they'll pay you $50 a week to leave them alone. That's the limit of his intelligence and his capability. And this is why everything is basically stuck right now. Because even the Iranian plan that came back, the 10-point plan, it was absolutely wild. Like, the plan that they came back with was significantly worse than what was negotiated in 2016. Like, how, Fabs?
And it was super interesting. I don't know if you saw any of the social posts from the respective embassies of Iran. So all the Iranian embassies that were based in different countries of the world were doing social posts, just completely mocking the fact that these guys were coming to the table with this god-awful deal, no knowledge of like the region, no knowledge of where the Straits of Hormuz was. I think in a post, J.D. Vance said it was in the Arabian Sea, and they were like, it's the Persian Sea, okay? Persia, Iran. And it was just like all of these things happening. You're like, the world is like on the verge of what felt like a third world war. And we've got these goofballs like negotiating our way out of it. And clearly we're not out of it yet. So it's the weird, and this is it. And it's the weirdest thing. What? And then this might sound like a diversion, but suddenly out of nowhere, Melania Trump is like, I had nothing to do with Epstein. And you're like, wait, nobody was even talking about you. Like, where did this come from? Like, everybody was focused on Iran, and the president's wife is like, by the way, the pedophile, financier, sex trafficker, I had nothing to do with him. And you're like, what? Nobody even asked that question. Like, what do you? It's the weirdest. It's like, you couldn't write it. It would just seem so ridiculous. No one would watch it or read it. And this is real life.
The weirdest thing is, surely if I were Trump, I'd been like, hold on a second. I just went to war to avoid talking about Epstein, and now you're bringing us back to Epstein, but in a really confusing way that even the journalists, like so many newspapers and journalists, were just like, I don't really know what this is. Like, I don't.
What do we do with this? This makes no sense. Like, in a world that doesn't make sense, this makes even less sense.
And then the worst part was, love, then it had people digging. So I remember at Midas Touch a couple of days ago, they were basically saying now they wonder if it's because there was a model that got trapped as a child in Epstein's pedophile ring, whose best friends or was allegedly best friends with Melania, and she came up with her or something to that effect. I really don't know. Honestly, these people are crazy. But yeah, what an absolute nut show.
My theory, which makes no sense, again, in a world that makes no sense, is that she's actually on our side and is trying to get us to focus on what she thinks is more important. And then maybe like some sort of, you know, I'm trying to be careful not to make this sound too facile, but when someone's being held hostage and they can't say out loud that they're being held hostage, and you've got to say, blink twice if you need help, but you can't say it. This is her blinking twice. This is her saying, hey, there's stuff happening. I need you to pay attention. That's the only thing that makes sense in a sense, in a world devoid of sense.
Maybe you're right, love. I don't know. I think my opinion of her is she is a lot more switched on than he is. She, from the accounts of the first presidency anyway, she did not want to be anywhere near this by all accounts. Like, from everything that I've read, allegedly she was hugely against this presidential term. She is profiting massively, as are the rest of the family, from this term. So I am skeptical of her status. I'm with you. Like, maybe you're right. Maybe this is her way of being like, actually, he's featured allegedly 30,000 times and nobody's really talking about it. And apparently there's some really scary images that they're trying to hide. Again, I don't know, because again, everybody was redirected off of it onto the Iran war. And now that is consuming us because the whole world has been dragged in to this war that has absolutely nothing to do with anybody. It had no reason for it, no real justification, despite the stuff that right-wing media are trying to now make up, like frantically backtracking. Oh, but it was the nuclear weapons. But wait, thought you said they were destroyed last year, but it was because they were always saying death to America. But if you attack them for no reason and you set up 15 military bases surrounding them, do you think that maybe they would be scared? Like, in the same way that Trump is threatening to take over Canada, Greenland, and Mexico for American safety. Like, don't know whether these people are just that stupid or whether they're so enamored with this machine and this power, and they're all making money by all accounts off the back of this, that they just say whatever the hell they need to keep this money train going at the expense, obviously, of the American people.
And I also think it's a thing of, most of us, I say most of us, I think you pointed it out, that on Christmas Day, the US bombed Nigeria. And then following that, they went and they, got Maduro out of Venezuela. And all of that seemed to go so smoothly that I imagine for someone who doesn't need much to have his ego inflated, he just thought, you know what? I'm just going to go into Iran, and that would be done in, 24 hours, like a week or at most. And he's almost like the perceived success of what led to this had just empowered him to what is now this massive failure by any stretch of the imagination. And that hubris just caught up with him. And maybe, like, we don't know, but maybe it's a good thing that it's happened now before he sort of got as ambitious to sort of attempt to go after Greenland, attempt to go after Canada, attempt to go after Mexico. Maybe this will like reset his ambitions and just sort of go back to this America first approach. But yeah, unfortunately, we now have to live with this cost of inflation, which is one of my personal bugbears that I can't get my head around. I'm not into economics, so maybe I'm just not smart enough to work it out. But, these prices go up and they never seem to come back down. Like, cost of living doesn't come back down. Like, ever since we had COVID, the prices have been up and stayed up. And so, when we talk about inflation, I think it's always important that we talk about how inflation isn't the prices rising, it's the rate at which the prices increase, right? So the prices are always going up. They're just going up quicker now. And that's all because of transactions. It's not because of small boat crossings. It's not because of global warming or people being too green or closing down, steelworks. It's because of Trump. So if you're feeling it right now, it's one person responsible. Like, really, it's just one individual.
One individual that has been supported by what was supposed to be checks and balances in America of Congress and the Senate, that was supposed to put the US Constitution and the US people first, that didn't and haven't and won't, so that this one individual has turned America increasingly into a fascist dictatorship where the people are suffering the most. And it's a sad indictment of what I think we've spoken about before, like how fragile democracy is if you don't continue to fight for it. And also, Love, I think to your point earlier on his comment around essentially just eradicate the civilization, a very sad indictment to the education system in America that this 250-year-old country thinks it's talking about the eradication of a civilization that has been around for thousands of years. I mean, it is wild, honestly. And it's a similar thing, even with, if you think about even Afghanistan, Love. The Russians had tried to invade Afghanistan before. They were not successful. The Americans tried to invade Afghanistan. They spent trillions of dollars, wasted dollars, and wasted lives on a 25-year war. They handed it back to the Taliban. There is a certain degree of hubris when it comes to the Middle East, which again, I think we're not supposed to call the Middle East, but you know what I mean? That they're just this bunch of uneducated savages that have a savage religion and can be just knocked down with a feather, and they will be subservient to the white supremacist Western civilization. Now, there are some countries, as we have seen, that are very happy to play that role, unfortunately. But there are others that are like, well, no.
No,
Like,
nope.
no, why should we do this? Like, why would we want to do this? I don't understand it. And again, our media talk about them in savage tones, the white supremacist tones, like they're inferior to us. And yet our economies are vastly struggling, love. Like the UK in particular is struggling post Brexit in particular. We've isolated ourselves. We don't really have anything to offer, unfortunately, because we're a services based economy. We don't have that many materials. Everything has been privatized to the extent that we're on the receiving end of terrible water, like sewage in our seas. All of the gas that and oil that was produced in the North Sea is sold on the open market and we buy it back, basically, which is why Kemi talking about more drilling is complete nonsense, because we have no control. You could drill, sure, but you're not going to see the benefit of it because it's the open market, right? We buy it back, so it doesn't make any difference. But like, the fact that we could sit in this state and speak so negatively about other countries, it's just fascinating to me. Because, yeah, not to jump around, but I sent you that video that I had on TikTok of Chancellor Merz, you know, the German chancellor. He visited China. And they had these like robots doing all kinds of stuff, like dancing. They were doing like martial arts. They were doing boxing. And it looked so lifelike compared to the ones that Musk is producing, where it took you like 17 minutes for the guy to like move the spoon to the right. And you're kind of watching this like, my God.
This is the future. Like this is how it happens. And it's funny because this company where I was at previously, they were launching their own humanoid robot. And at that point, I sort of said to my wife, in 5 years' time, I think humanoid robots will be available for purchase by the regular member of the public. And so that was a year ago. And I'm still sticking to that guess because the rate at which they're improving these robots is so fast. It's not like anything we've seen before. And it's that combination of robotics and AI, where on one hand, like I saw a video of factory workers in a clothing factory, and they all had head-mounted cameras so that their data was being captured, so that that robot could be trained on how to use these clothing machines. And so you can imagine like just robots doing all of the work 24/7, no healthcare, no pension, no salary. It's just maintenance, right? And so the incentive to those businesses is so high that they don't care. There's no consideration of like what that means, both to the human worker, but also who their customer's going to be. If everything is robotic, like who you selling to? Because we won't have jobs. Like AI and robotics will take over everything. And it's so weird that like that's not part of the conversation. Like we both have openly held our hands up and admitted that we use AI all the time and it's super helpful. At some point, you've got to say, this is going to make us irrelevant from like a work perspective. Because I'm not sure what it is that is a job that people do at the moment that can't be done by some sort of combination of AI and robotic. I would love for you to sort of tell me I'm wrong and that there is something. So please, the floor is yours.
Honestly, love, prior to see that video with the Chinese robots or humanoids, sorry, I would have said to you that any kind of manual laborer profession, we would have been fine. So like plumbing, bricks, blah, blah, blah. But seeing the precision and agility of these things, I'm now a bit like there is always going to be there's always going to be significant value in human capital and innovation. I don't believe that could ever be replaced. But the challenge is, to your point, I think what 25 people could do before, you could have one person doing and 10 robots. That's the challenge. That's where it gets super, super, super dangerous. And I feel like we're at this moment in time where, as a human race, we have to reckon with what is coming. Because I think, I shared an article this week. There was an article about, there was a development by, I think it was Anthropic. We will share the article in the edit, but essentially they've developed one of the AI. Oh no, wait, no, I don't think it's Anthropic actually. I think it's an open source platform that is creating these AI agents that are so sophisticated they can create significant spam, like bots, social media bots. They can create scams, they can create messages, etc. That provides a threat to people because obviously these scammers are always out there. And there is also something that Anthropic has done, but they've released it to governments and corporations because essentially this AI is able to exploit weaknesses in legacy systems. That's
Yeah.
it. That's
So
one.
this
Sorry.
is
Yeah,
Claude Mythos, right?
that's it. That's
So
the
yeah,
one.
essentially what they said is that this is pretty significant, and we haven't got our hands on it, so we've not been able to sort of see for ourselves. Basically, what they've said is that it's so dangerous and it's exposing so many vulnerabilities in legacy systems that if it were to be launched, then it would just be a nightmare with banks, healthcare, government all being impacted by unsavory hackers exploiting these vulnerabilities. So there's some sort of coalition between a few of the sort of major tech companies. I think there's 12 companies in total who are all using this Claude Mythos to essentially sort of almost backdate all of the work that they've done and sort of take a look at how they can either patch the vulnerabilities as quickly as possible or protect the usage of Claude Mythos in a way that means that if it is released for the public, it's not as dangerous. And I think it's worth sort of highlighting that, the last time one of the major AI companies decided not to release a version of their software that was ready to go was back in 2019. And that was when OpenAI had ChatGPT 2. And they basically said that if they launch this, it's so good at writing convincing misinformation that it could be, really dangerous to democracy. That's 2019. Look how far we've come in, 7 years, arguably a long time, but to the point where now we're not worried about misinformation. That's not a concern of ours because Claude and all of the sort of major AIs can write this information really easily. Like that's nothing to them these days. Now it's like the fabric of the infrastructure that runs the internet, that runs our digital age. That's what we're concerned about at the moment. So really interesting. And I guess we just have to wait and see what happens, unfortunately. But there's no involvement from us. We're just passengers.
That's what drives me insane, love. That's what enrages me so much with all of this because essentially, like we were saying in a few of our podcasts ago, unfortunately, the tech companies have now become the bad guys. They're the ones, in order to prevent Trump from putting in his tariffs because it was affecting the materials that they use to make a lot of their products and their markets in China and blah, 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 blah. They effectively paid the bribes, allegedly paid the bribes to Trump's White House, like $100 million each or whatever. They just want to keep their companies going. So they keep this scumbag on side. This scumbag is more interested in enriching himself personally and his family that he's not thinking long term. Our governments are now stuck because previously America used to be the friend, quote unquote, and they were the ones that we could trust and rely on, and therefore we didn't ever want to upset them, so we allowed their companies to come into our ecosystems, much like Palantir has, which we discussed earlier. So everybody seems frozen and stuck now to not put some significant checks and balances in place to control these guys. Like, there is, like, to your point, in 7 years, they've now got to the stage where the AI agents are sophisticated enough that they can identify significant weaknesses in legacy systems everywhere. 7 years. If these dingbats in our governments wait for another 10 years, like they always do, because it's so damn slow, it's too late. And then you're fighting what exactly? Do you know what I mean?
And I think that point is the biggest frustration is that these guys say that, the pace of technology is so fast that by the time we put in legislation, it's already too late. So then you need to put in legislation that's based on principle, not the specifics of what it does, because we still need protection. And the whole point of government is to protect its people. Like that's the biggest role you have. These excuses, they don't bear weight. And clearly from my point of view, the incentive was always money, and that's why they're not doing it, because we've seen how a number of politicians have gone from the UK government into tech companies. I think it was Nick Clegg who moved to Facebook, and you're like, this shouldn't be allowed to happen. You shouldn't go from government to tech company. You shouldn't go from government to finance company. Like, those things just shouldn't be allowed to happen.
It's so frustrating, but you're bang on. Like, they can absolutely put the goalposts in place. And what's interesting, as you were talking, the language you were using, it's reminded me of this point in hypernormalization, this documentary. And essentially they were saying governments had originally been created to reflect the interests of their people. So try to make things better for their people and their constituents. And then at some point in the 50s and 60s, government had now simply been there to just be reactive. So just be reactive to something that's coming. So to your point, they're not even really thinking about it, because all they're doing is just fucking reacting, endlessly reacting. And then by that point, is way, way too late. And the reason the tech companies hate Europe is because Europe puts guardrails around things that absolutely should be there. So protecting your data, making sure that the data companies are holding about you, you can see what they're holding about you, because actually they do not have that in America. I'm pretty sure that the data is not used in malicious ways, because it could have knock-on implications to your life. So even just randomly, like on a TV show the other day, the identity fraud, some kind of identity fraud in the US, and basically these drug dealers were using this person's identity. So this guy went to prison because they thought he was a drug dealer. So like, if you have no control over your data, much like even with the healthcare, so like they take our healthcare data, you have a reform government that wants to bring in privatization. Now healthcare companies, private companies, own the data that Palantir could have sold them, or tell them how they could market you, so you can't get health insurance. So then what happens, like stuff like this, I just find it so frustrating, because and it doesn't help, because you do have this orange buffoon who's in power that is on an hour-by-hour basis, just like a complete mental case, just flip-flopping, just dropping figurative bombs here, left, right, do. So if your theory of government is reactive, then the governments are just constantly like, okay, what's he done now? Shit. Okay, let me try to figure out. Okay, let me go fly to the Middle East to try and have a discussion with them. Okay, do we do this? What are the papers saying? But like, in the midst of all this, these guys are just getting away with it.
And this is a problem. Like, I don't know if this is a good example, so I'm kind of like reluctant to sort of put it forward. But I remember Dave Chappelle talking about how when the Cosby Show was being made, because Bill Cosby was so conscious of negative imagery of Black people, he had a psychiatrist as part of the TV show to make sure that there was no negative imagery, and there was nothing that was going to be shown that would sort of cast Black people and Black families in a negative way. And it's like, well, if one man can decide that that's a good thing to do, why is that not part of every social media company, every media company, whether it be a TV show? Like, why can't we have something as simple as, independent body that sits within an organization to make sure that no harm is done to the people? Like,
of course you can.
It's
but
simple.
It gets in the way of profit. That's all it is, isn't it? That's at the end of the day. Yeah, it just gets in the way of profit. They don't want to have any controls on them. If you try to put some sensible controls, then you've got that nutbag Musk screaming on his awful X platform now about censorship, which is always ironic because he's the person that blocks anyone who criticizes him. But again, let's not look into that too deeply. But that's the thing, isn't it, love? Because they control these narratives, they control they control our government. So really, even, again, it just feels like you're so powerless, which again takes us back to the beginning, which is in this instance in Hungary, where all of these factors feel so weighted against you. There absolutely is a way for us as human beings to join together and say no. So like even the vote on Wednesday, let us, if we really believe in it, let's exercise our democratic right to say no to Palantir in our NHS and our security services. Like, we don't need this outside agency that we have no control over and who has leaders that have some frankly disturbing views. Like you said, go Google it. It is possible to push back on these things, but the sad fact is we have to fight for it.
Yeah,
That's the thing, isn't it?
yeah,
And if you're already exhausted by the capitalist system and the capitalist machine, which is designed to exhaust you, and it just feels like, oh God, Jesus Christ. Okay, so now I got to write an email. Oh, fantastic. Oh, bloody hell. Okay, great. I'm going to add this onto my list now because this crazy person is now got access to my data and I didn't even really realize that that was happening.
yeah. I think, Mira will say it kindly. I will say it harshly. Yes, write the fucking email because otherwise, like, the future's lost. That's how we lose our future, by not writing an email. You're at work writing emails all day, I bet, right? And this is just something you have to do as part of a democratic system.
And it
Do it.
doesn't need to be sophisticated as well. Like, write the email, dear MP, put your name and your address so that they know that you're part of your constituency, and just say, please reflect that I am against Palantir in the National Health Service and the security services because I don't agree with their values, their control on my data. Or just say, I don't agree with them in the National Health Service. There should be a review to understand to what extent their tentacles are, what's available to them, how will this impact us in the future. Whatever you want to say, the fact is, even just putting your name on that and sending it to your MP means your MP is aware that this matters to you and you care. And it's their job to make sure that they reflect that in Parliament on Wednesday. And I would say, again, if you've never voted, or if you've been in a position where you think your vote doesn't matter, more so than ever, your vote really does. Because the people that have never voted before, the ones who have been voiceless, you guys can make the change right now, right? Which is why Reform are going so hard for people who haven't voted, because the sad thing is their platform will cause as much damage to the UK as Trump has done to America. And it's on you guys to even just do a quick, like we say, Google search and just look at the policies. Like, you'd have to ignore, if you go to Reform's website, ignore the first third, because the first third is just all about asylum seekers and immigrants. Just ignore that just forget it. But like, scroll down and ask them what they think about workers' rights and workers' protections, privatizing the National Health Service, which is what they want to do, taking away the protections that you're used to, putting in a government department apparently that's going to go after people that had said anything nasty to them. That came out in an article by Sam Bright a couple of days ago. Just look into it, people. I beg you, because as we said with a previous episode on the people of Minnesota, once these guys are in power, it is infinitely harder to get rid of them, to fight them. And if you're tired now, imagine what it's going to feel like when they take away the things that protect you. Like, you're working 60 hours a week now. You're not getting overtime. You're not getting maternity leave. Your benefits have been cut. So it's even harder for you to feed your families. You may be unemployed. That is not available to you now. How are you going to survive? How are you going to pay your bills? How are you going to pay your rent? Like, those things become harder and harder and harder under governments like this. So the fight becomes harder, but now you're even more tired. That's the crazy thing about it. So yes, we didn't want to lecture our lovely friends, but we just hope you feel the same way as we do. So on a more positive note, obviously on Tuesday, our friendship group, we went to go see Akala, who is a musician, he's a writer, he's an activist. He's kind of annoying actually, because he's like multi-talented, isn't he? He's like so multi-talented. He was hosted by Miss Harriman, who is just an exceptional human. I came across him first at work because he presented at a work event, and he just talked with so much empathy and compassion about humanity and community. But anyway, it was called State of the Union. Yeah, maybe you could talk a bit about it, Fab, so people know.
Yeah, I think the thing that I guess really stuck with me was the fact that not only were so many people there, but it felt like it was such a broad spectrum of people who, I think we talk to each other and we talk in our friendship group and we kind of wonder if that's all there is of like sort of people that think like us, people that, want a better future, that have progressive ideals, that want a sort of, radical solutions, but are also kind of in a weird way still part of the system. We still, have our 9 to 5s and, go about our daily lives and wonder, what's going on. And it felt like everybody in the room was the same as that. Still, wanted a better future, still wanted to do the work. Young, old, black, white, and everything in between. We were all there and we were all listening and we were all sort of getting that. Maybe it was confirmation, just that actually, to the point of this podcast, you're not crazy. Crazy things are going on in the world. But there are ways that we can deal with it. And, it's an old phrase and maybe it's been done to death, but knowledge is power. And so, keep educating yourself. One of the facts he shared was that, was it as recently as 1991, it was lawful in the UK for a man to force himself on his wife. And I'm like, that's not that long ago. And so to your point around like looking at other countries and saying they're savages, we have been savages for a long time over here. We can't look at ourselves and think that we're the most dignified and pristine and morally correct nation on the planet. We still got work to do, and a lot of that can be undone really quickly if we're not careful, if we're not vigilant, if we don't, do this mass participation thing, right? So yeah, I mean, look, there was a number of things that were said in it, and I'm not as intelligent as him, so I can't recall it all. It was good to go to. I don't know what you took from it.
No, as you were talking, I was thinking like one point that he raised, which again, like the cool thing for me with Akala that I think I love about him so much is Fabian says, knowledge is power. He's so knowledgeable. He clearly reads a lot. His mind is kind of like a steel trap. So he just remembers all these facts and you're like, oh my God. So like one thing he was saying is, and Trump says this a lot, he talks about invasion, people invading from these third world nations. But he was saying that in the UK, for example, when we rightly set up the Ukraine resettlement scheme, Ukraine on the corruption index was way, way below. Ukraine in terms of, I think it was like literacy, access to democracy, the amount of corruption, all of these things on the markers, they were lower down than some African nations, which are typically heralded as these kind of savage third world nations, these third world countries in this kind of derogatory way. He obviously more so than Fabian and I, as we say, we can't remember the stats, so we'll have to go dig that out. But like, it was just such an interesting point to make, because you just never really think about it. And again, you'd have to go beyond the headline. And I think what I loved the most of was, I think I turned to you at this point as well, like the first sort of 2 minutes in. And I think Miss Anne Harriman had said something, look, like, listen, everything's just going crazy. What on earth is happening? So I've got to ask you, Akala, how are you? And for a split second, I felt like he'd almost like paused a bit before he answered, because actually we aren't all asking ourselves that, right? Because it is so utterly exhausting. And every time you open social media, there's some utter nonsense that's come out from the US or some crazy shit that Trump has done that affects all of us, whatever. And I was thinking, I turned to Fabian at this point because I was like, that's what he asked me. So if you guys remember on a few podcasts ago, I was just saying like it just felt a little bit exhausting. And Fabian, he called me up and he's like, listen, Miz, are you okay? And I was just, and that's what we want to say to you guys. Like, we're here because we don't want you to feel like you're alone. Hopefully some of this stuff resonates with you, and we really hope that you're okay. And if there's anything in all of the messages that we see and these great people that we listen to, it is just that we are so much stronger together. We are so much more powerful together. And as a community of us, we can change these things for the betterment of our future. It is possible, despite what they tell us. And in order to progress, I don't believe that you need to move backwards. And in order to progress, I don't believe that you have to destroy everything that we currently have today to achieve it. I don't think that's necessary. So yeah, that was really my takeaway. But what an absolutely incredible evening that was. And I would highly, highly recommend that if he does something like that again, or indeed if you can support the South Bank Centre in London, because they do such amazing arts and exhibitions and talks, and it's not all paid for, you know, a lot of it's free, so it's funded by the centre itself. But yeah, I would highly encourage you guys, because it was just brilliant. It was so nice,
100%.
wasn't it, love? It's just community, isn't it? Like you say, at the end of the day, there were 2,500 people there, and you were like, oh,
Yeah.
great, it's not just us.
This is where my people are.
And it was so lovely. It was so, and that's one thing I was saying to my mum when I got back. Like, you know, everybody seeks to divide us. People seek to put us in these little buckets. So, you know, are you English? Are you British? Are you brown? Are you black? Are you Indian? Are you Malaysian? Whatever it is. And what was really interesting in that whole room, when people talked about, when he talked about the plight of the Palestinian people and the oppression and the apartheid and now the genocide, the whole audience were clapping and supporting that statement. And that audience was not filled with just brown, Muslim, Palestinian people. That audience was filled with loads of different people from lots of different religions. I mean, just in our friendship group alone, we're all different religions. We all have different backgrounds. We've come from different places. The audience was, like Fabian was saying earlier, was completely mixed. There was a lot of ethnic diversity. I'd imagine there was a lot of people that were probably atheists as well, to be fair, in that group. But it didn't matter, because humanity is the most important thing. And that's what I came away from that, just like, lovely. It just doesn't have to be a thing that you don't have to be a specific characteristic that you, in order for you to empathize with someone. You
Yeah,
can just
100%.
empathize with people because you're a human being.
100%. I wonder if that's a nice note to end on. Is there anything else that we probably should talk about, may have missed, to happen in the week?
I think so, love, but I agree with you. I think this is a good place to end it. And I think we'll pick up again, and we'll be back on track. Now we're back from our holidays. We're energized and revitalized. So yeah, please do comment as well. Like, if you think there's any topics that we've missed that you'd love to have covered, or any perspectives that you'd like to share, please do drop us a comment, because we're still learning and we really appreciate the feedback. So thank you so much for listening.